Gypsy Rose Blancharde and her boyfriend Nicholas Godejohn are facing murder charges in the death of Ky3 or Dee Dee Blanchard, Gypsy's mother. Court documents say the two admitted to their part in the crime, but Dee Dee's death has uncovered an alleged pattern of financial fraud, one that may have included charities in Kansas City. In 2009, Fox 4 first met Gypsy and her self-proclaimed Cajun mama. The two claimed they were from Louisiana and had lost everything in Hurricane Katrina.
And no shoes, truthfully.
And to make matters worse, Gypsy, who at the time claimed to be 14 years old, also reportedly suffered from multiple medical issues. Dee Dee and Gypsy were on their way to Kansas City on an Angel flight from Springfield to be seen by doctors at Children's Mercy.
They've been a huge blessing in our life. I all the time say between Angel Flight, the Hope Lodge, and Children's Mercy, they saved my baby's life.
Gypsy Rose appeared sweet and childlike.
To do that of the kindness of their hearts is amazing.
But Sheriff Jim Arnott from Greene County, Missouri says everything people thought they knew about Gypsy and Dee Dee may have been a lie. He says Gypsy doesn't even need the wheelchair she's always seen in. She walks just fine. The two spent time at the Hope Lodge in Kansas City, run by the American Cancer Society. You see them here in Facebook photos as Dee Dee gets her head shaved in solidarity with Gypsy and to raise money for cancer research. The organization wouldn't comment on their time at the Hope Lodge. Children's Mercy also wouldn't comment for privacy reasons, but in an article, a doctor describes the two as positive and supportive. And for Angel Flight, a representative there says he is shocked by the accusations of fraud and murder. However, he says there was proper medical identification for Gypsy to be on Angel Flights.
Volunteer Way, Springfield, Missouri.
So, as the case continues to unfold, more may come out about how a mother-daughter pair that seemed like the perfect story of hope
Feels so cool.
allegedly became an example of deceit. Now, in full disclosure, I met Gypsy and Dee Dee while a volunteer at the Kansas City Hope Lodge. Gypsy and her boyfriend are in jail on a $1 million bond each. As an example of alleged fraud in the Blanchards' lives, charging documents give 3 different birthdays for Gypsy.
Hello everyone, I'm Dawn. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for visiting with me today. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel, The Cutting Board. We do all kinds of content here. We do food content like taste test and cooking. We do true crime, SFX makeup, regular makeup, chit chats, DIYs, vlogs, hauls, and most importantly, at least to me, Disney content. Now this is going to be a serious video. This is going to be also a very long video, but I feel it's important, and I've worked on this video for a very long time. So in this presentation, we are going to discuss the Gypsy Rose case. I do understand if you want to skip this one because I know a lot of people are tired of the subject matter and just over it. But I've been working on this particular video for a while and I just really want to get it out there. This video may not be as comprehensive as I first wanted it to be, just because there are probably examples I've left out or what have you, but there are going to be other parts of this series. But if there are things that I didn't mention that you want me to discuss in a fair and balanced fashion, reach out to me via email only, and I will collect all of the information that people send me, and I will compile another video and present that to you. I'm hoping to do a part 2 and part 3 based on Dee Dee and based on Nicholas. So keep an eye out for those if you are interested. So this video is not intended to bash Gypsy. It's not intended to bash those who oppose her or support her. I just want to dive in and discuss the case or story as it has been told by Gypsy, why so many people don't believe her, and why so many people support her as well. So my goal is to create a fair, balanced video that tries to steer clear of villainizing anyone and just focuses on what we have learned from Gypsy and what has come out since her release or even during her prison stay. In order to promote open, thoughtful discussion, I ask that you all keep the comments kind. No bashing of each other. Please try to understand where the other is coming from. No one is required to agree. It would make for a very boring world if that was the way it is. Most of you already know how I feel, and I have not wavered at all. I haven't. I never supported Gypsy from the second I first heard about this case. When I saw that girl walk into the courtroom when I first learned about this many years ago. There was something always kind of off to me, and that opinion has only gotten stronger as I research it further. But I am going to try to not let my opinions influence this video. Again, I want it fair and balanced. So Gypsy Rose Blancharde has been called a victim, a mastermind, a survivor, a manipulator, and a murderer. After serving 8 years for orchestrating the murder of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, Gypsy walked free in late 2023 to massive media attention. But while some cheer her as a symbol of resilience, others, many others, believe that she's lying and that she's always lied. Tonight, we dig into the interviews, court records, emails, and online chatter to ask, why don't people believe Gypsy Rose? And also, why do so many other people seem to support her? So let's talk about Gypsy's upbringing just a little bit. Gypsy claims that Dee Dee said she had leukemia, muscular dystrophy, seizures. She allegedly suffered years of unnecessary medical treatments, but evidence shows that those medical treatments may not have all been unnecessary due to a microdeletion Gypsy Rose suffers from. Gypsy Rose was diagnosed with 1q21.1 microdeletion. This is a genetic condition involving a chromosomal change where a small piece is missing from chromosome 1. 1q21.1 deletion syndrome is a rare aberration of chromosome 1. A human cell has one pair of identical chromosomes on chromosome 1. With the 1q21.1 deletion syndrome, one chromosome of the pair is not complete because a part of the sequence of the chromosome is missing. Gypsy Rose was first diagnosed with a chromosomal microdeletion in 2012. She would have been 20 to 21 years old, dependent on the time of year she received the diagnosis. The diagnosis came decades after her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, had already sought treatment for numerous serious illnesses. But one could allege that the treatment was due to effects of the microdeletion. Yet, Dee Dee was posthumously accused of having a form of medical ABUSE known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. However, from simple research, you can ascertain that at least some of the medical interventions could have been due to things caused by or related to the microdeletion. About 75% of all children with the 1q21.1 microdeletion have delayed development, particularly affecting the development of motor skills such as sitting, standing, and walking, grabbing, holding things like that. Distinctive facial features can also be associated with 1Q21.1 microdeletions. The changes are usually subtle and can include a prominent forehead, a large rounded nasal tip, a long space between the nose and upper lip, the philtrum, and a high arched roof of the mouth, the palate. Other common signs and symptoms of 1Q21.1 microdeletions include an unusually small head, short stature, and eye problems such as clouding of the lenses. Less frequently, 1Q21.1 microdeletions are associated with heart defects, abnormalities of the genitalia or urinary system, bone abnormalities, particularly in the hands and feet, and hearing loss. Neurological problems that have been reported in people with a 1Q21.1 microdeletion include seizures and weak muscle tone, hypotonia. Psychiatric or behavioral problems affect a very small percentage of people with this type of microdeletion. These include autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, and sleep issues. Studies suggest that deletions of genetic material from the 1Q21.1 region may also be risk factors for schizophrenia. Some people with a microdeletion can require a feeding tube if they have difficulties like dysphagia. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm sorry if I didn't. That's trouble swallowing, weak sucking, or reflux, which are associated with certain microdeletions. The specific features of the microdeletion determine if a feeding tube is necessary, as different deletions can cause various symptoms that impact a person's ability to eat. Some more details about the microdeletion diagnosis. A single real ailment. So the microdeletion is the only actual medical condition that Gypsy was found to have, allegedly. But it is claimed that it is not linked to any of the specific severe symptoms that her mother claimed she was suffering from. But that depends on who you ask. Because unfortunately, the medical records are out there. I don't think that's right, but they are out there. And although Gypsy said her illnesses her mom claimed she had were not related to the microdeletion, and yes, that is a very real possibility. However, that information came from Gypsy, at least where I gathered it from, and we have definitely been given reason to not trust or doubt just what she says, as she has proven to not be very trustworthy, very reliable or credible. I'm not saying wholeheartedly she's lying about that thing. I'm just saying it's definitely a possibility based on what we've learned. Discovery decades later. In her book, My Time to Stand, Gypsy reflected on the irony that this legitimate abnormality was discovered long after she had endured what she says were unnecessary treatments for fake illnesses. Was used as a justification. Gypsy believes her mother may have known about the genetic change earlier and used it as a smoking gun to legitimize the numerous fabricated illnesses again, the alleged illnesses that she claimed. But if that were true, wouldn't it have been notated on her medical records, much sooner? Unless her mom found some way to bury it, but I just can't see that being likely. But what would her reason be to suppress it? Because it could only help in material gain and validate medical concerns. So hiding it wouldn't make any sense. Also, follow-up confirmation. After her release from prison, Gypsy revealed that she was retested in October 2024, confirming the diagnosis again. She also stated that her daughter tested negative for the condition, which thank God for that. And what about other health issues? Dee Dee did have a handwritten note listing Gypsy's medical issues. It was badly written, poorly spelled, all that. But were there medical documents that prove Gypsy was receiving treatment for those? Or was that list just for face value, just for show? The motivation behind that handwritten list does matter. But Dee Dee is not here to tell us what that motivation truly, really, truthfully was. We know Gypsy didn't have leukemia or muscular dystrophy. We know certain ailments just were fabricated. We do know that. But not every single thing was a complete lie. Eye problems. Gypsy did legitimately have issues with her eyes. She had strabismus, or what most of us call lazy eye, and had corrective surgery when she was younger. She also needed glasses. But Dee Dee allegedly exaggerated these problems, sometimes presenting Gypsy as if she was nearly blind. Again, that's alleged. On to the salivary gland issues. In 2002, Dee Dee allegedly pushed doctors to remove Gypsy's salivary glands because doctors are so easy to push around, claiming she had excessive drooling. As a result, Gypsy supposedly developed real problems: chronic dry mouth and tooth decay. Because of the surgery and later intervention, it is said that Gypsy also developed difficulty swallowing, which is said to be the actual cause for the feeding tube. The argument being the feeding tube was not placed because of trouble eating and battling leukemia. However, drooling can be caused by swallowing difficulties. So the salivary gland removal should not have created issues with swallowing. But that switches back and forth depending on what study you're looking at. Dee Dee's alleged claim was Gypsy had excessive drooling. And at first glance, that might sound like too much saliva was the problem. But saliva itself doesn't cause difficulty swallowing, not the saliva alone. When a person has trouble swallowing, they can't clear saliva properly, so it seems excessive. That makes it look like they're producing too much, like it's excessive, when in reality, the real issue is in the swallowing process, not in the glands. Instead of addressing swallowing function, Dee Dee supposedly convinced doctors that the answer was to reduce Gypsy's saliva production. That led to the removal of her salivary glands. I said salivary a lot. I'm going to say it more. Yet the salivary gland removal, along with the feeding tube placement, could have been a decision by the medical team as an extremely aggressive solution, which is not always what doctors want to do. However, that would not be common medical intervention. Critics find it unlikely that doctors would perform needless surgeries despite the insistence of the mother, because she's a mother, she's not the doctor. Also, I think it's important to note that we have 3 pairs of major salivary glands, totaling 6 glands. Parotid glands, which are located in front of and below each ear. Submandibular glands, situated below the jawbone. Sublingual glands, underneath the tongue. In addition, there are numerous minor salivary glands scattered throughout the mouth, throat, and nasal cavity. These glands number in the hundreds. Gypsy Rose Blanchard had her submandibular salivary glands removed. Their function is to produce saliva, which helps to lubricate the mouth, digest food, protect teeth from decay. We know that Gypsy suffers from dry mouth. She had the feeding tube, which critics argue actually was in fact necessary to help with digestion, and we know she had pretty significant tooth decay. I do want to note here that Gypsy was taken Tegretol, an anticonvulsive, and it's an uncommon side effect can be drooling and may become more prominent as the dosage of Tegretol increases, if it increases. Impaired swallowing is another very uncommon side effect of Tegretol. The issue may not be excessive saliva production, which is hypersalivation, but rather an impaired ability to swallow the normal amount of saliva. This can occur due to the drug's effect on muscle control, which includes the muscles of the mouth and throat. Excessive drooling, along with other symptoms like tremors, confusion, and dizziness, can be a sign of Tegretol intoxication, especially if the Tegretol did increase saliva. That could cause the tooth decay that she experienced as well. Sorry. Again, I'm not coming up with things to defend Gypsy, okay? I'm not trying to defend her. I'm not trying to not defend her. I just want, again, to be fair and balanced, and I'm sharing what my research showed me, okay? And all of my sources will be provided in the description of this video. But I also do not want to be insensitive. I know Gypsy suffered from tooth decay, and it seems to me that would be from the removal of the salivary glands. And the removal of the submandibular glands would affect food digestion as well, which we talked about, possibly making the feeding tube necessary, as I stated earlier. It's not lost on me that Gypsy went through some things. I understand that. And for that, I am very sympathetic. I really am. Let's move on to the Munchausen by proxy claims. Was it ever considered by the court that Dee Dee did not have Munchausen by proxy, but was simply malingering for financial gain? When people look back at the case of Dee Dee Blanchard, one question often comes up. Was she really suffering from factitious disorder imposed on another? You know, of course, better known as Munchausen by proxy. Or was she just malingering, fake an illness in her daughter purely for money and free perks, gifts, all kinds of things? So let's break this down. Malingering is when someone fakes or exaggerates symptoms for an obvious external reward. That could mean avoiding work, collecting disability checks, or gaining money or legal advantages. It's intentional, calculated, and usually stops once the reward is achieved. It's not a mental illness. Sorry. On the other hand, Munchausen by proxy, or again, factitious disorder imposed on another, is very different. It isn't about money. It's about attention, sympathy, and control. The caregiver, in this case Dee Dee, allegedly, deliberately makes another person sick or convinces others they're sick. Not because of a paycheck, but because they crave the role of the selfless, heroic caretaker. So, where does Dee Dee fit? She did get some benefits, like housing from Habitat for Humanity. And contrary to popular belief, the housing was not free. That's not how Habitat works. There was a mortgage with Habitat for Humanity. The family that gets the house pays a small mortgage. And they also got charitable trips and community donations. But, you know, some would say, if you look closer, that was never the main driver. I think it was, but her pattern of behavior, dragging Gypsy to supposedly countless unnecessary doctor visits, insisting on invasive procedures, even shaving Gypsy's head to look more like a chemotherapy patient, went far beyond financial gain. These are the hallmarks of Munchausen by proxy. But those who malinger aren't above doing any of those things either. And even for mental health professionals, it is impossible, absolutely impossible, to properly diagnose someone they've never examined, that they've never spoken to. I still feel this could have been malingering. Because this was their job. This is how they got income. Most importantly, the courts never had the chance to formally evaluate Dee Dee. They never would have, because she was a deceased patient. It was a murder trial or a murder case. She was murdered before any trial or psychiatric assessment. But experts who reviewed her history overwhelmingly agree Dee Dee's actions weren't just fraud. They were psychological. She was living through the attention, sympathy, and admiration that came with being the mother of a perpetually ill child. But she was also living off of the money it brought them. Again, that was their income. So still, it could be malingering. And who were the experts that examined Dee Dee's history? So there was Dr. Mark Feldman, a psychiatrist who is considered an expert on Munchausen by proxy. He has spoken extensively about Dee Dee's behavior fitting the profile of the disorder. He said Dee Dee's manipulation of Gypsy's medical history was one of the clearest cases he'd ever seen. Because Feldman was paid by HBO, Critics argue that there's a potential conflict of interest. Documentaries sometimes frame stories to fit a narrative. And having a paid expert can look like bias, even if his opinions are supposedly consistent with his broader work, his expertise. Importantly, Feldman never personally evaluated Dee Dee. Again, why would he? She was already passed away. Since she was already dead, he couldn't. His assessment was based on secondhand evidence, medical records, testimony from Gypsy, and reporting. This means that his opinion, while as informed as it could be, was not a formal medical diagnosis. And there still is the idea, returning to the testimony, that Gypsy was heavily coached by her attorney to get the Munchausen by proxy story solidified. Some skeptics believe that his involvement helped reinforce the MBP angle in a way that made the story more dramatic for TV audiences, possibly overshadowing other interpretations. There was also Dr. Mary Sanders, a clinical professor of psychiatry at Stanford University. She also explained in media coverage how Dee Dee's behavior matched that of Munchausen by proxy patterns. And then there was Dr. Michael Wellner, a forensic psychiatrist. He was interviewed about the case and described Dee Dee's control and deception as textbook examples of MBP. But we do have to mention much or all of the testimony that they reviewed in regards to Dee Dee Blanchard, again, was from Gypsy Rose, who was probably heavily encouraged, influenced by, and coached by her attorney. So to put it simply, if Dee Dee were malingering, it would have been about money and material gain, which it appeared to be about the money and material gain, because again, that's how they were living. She and Gypsy were benefiting greatly financially from the fake ailments. But others say that Dee Dee was operating on something deeper and darker. Her need wasn't financial, it was emotional, and that's why her behavior is remembered as a textbook case of Munchausen by proxy, not malingering. But isn't it irresponsible to state a deceased person has Munchausen by proxy when they have never been diagnosed with it? It gets into both ethics in psychiatry and how the media frames cases like Dee Dee Blanchard's. 1. Formal diagnosis. Psychiatrists and psychologists generally avoid making formal diagnoses of deceased people because diagnosis requires direct clinical evaluation. Interviews, testing, medical history, and observation. With someone who is deceased, you can't do that. At best, you're working from secondhand records, testimonies, and circumstances or circumstantial evidence without the knowledge of whether you can truly trust that or not. That means any diagnosis is really more of a retrospective opinion, not a clinical fact. 2, why experts still comment. Even though it's not technically a diagnosis, experts will often say a case is consistent with a particular disorder. In Dee Dee Blanchard's case, her behaviors, doctor shopping, falsifying symptoms, allegedly forcing unnecessary medical care on Gypsy, align almost perfectly with factitious disorder imposed on another, as it's defined in the DSM-5. Because of that, professionals, journalists, and advocates use that label as shorthand to explain her pattern of behavior. But the information they have to form this opinion is, again, from Gypsy Rose. A lot of it is. And Gypsy Rose is a manipulative woman who got an emotionally invested and mentally unwell young man to kill her mother. What can we trust? Someone who has also lied a lot about everything. One needs to only watch her interrogation to know this. You can even see the mask of manipulation on during her interrogation. It's palpable.
That I'm about ready to tell you, then you need to tell me. Okay. Your mom's dead. Okay. Now, what I want to ask you is, what? Your mom's passed away. Okay, and she's deceased. All right. Now, what I want to ask you, did you have involvement in this? Okay.
No.
Hang on. Listen to me for just a second. Okay. I want you to understand something. Okay. Remember the snowball that we talked about? You remember the pencil that we talked about? I'm going to demonstrate something with a pencil here, okay? Look at me. Look at me for just a second, okay? Sometimes people are going along, you know how you got a pencil? You got the lead here and you got the eraser right here, right? You know what I'm talking about? You've seen a pencil, right? You've used a pencil before, right? Okay? And when you write with a pencil, you write your own story, right? Okay? And you take that pencil and you're writing along with your story. Well, sometimes some people make mistakes when they write stuff down, don't they? We've all made mistakes. You've made mistakes. I've made mistakes, right? You ever made a mistake in your life?
Yeah.
And I've made mistakes in my life. And hang on just a second, right sides, don't we? Okay? And I think that's where we're at with all this, all right? What happened with your mom that night?
I don't know what happened with my mom at all.
Okay, just listen to me, okay, sweetheart? You know what you think is going to happen to you if you go down that path. It's not a path to go down.
If anything, I don't tell lies.
Okay, then don't.
I have a lot of friends in Missouri. I know that.
Okay.
And, I would never hurt my mom.
Okay, sweetheart, do you really want that? Okay, I'm not going to play around with this, okay?
Sir, I didn't do
Listen
anything.
to me. Listen to me.
Things very, very clearly. You think that it's me? Why don't you think that it's me? I have always loved my mom. My mom and I are best friends.
Listen to me. Listen to me.
3, the risk of irresponsibility. It can be irresponsible if people treat it as a proven medical. It's not that it can be. It is irresponsible if you treat it as a real diagnosis rather than an informed interpretation. The danger is oversimplifying or sensationalizing the story, turning it into a true crime label rather than recognizing the complexity of mental illness, ABUSE, and social systems that failed to intervene. 4, so what's responsible? The responsible way to frame it is something like Dee Dee Blanchard was never formally diagnosed, but her behavior appears highly consistent with what is known as Munchausen by proxy or factitious disorder imposed on another. But again, you have to understand how reliable is that information. This wording makes clear that it's an interpretation, not a clinical fact. But with that in mind, we can't responsibly keep saying Dee Dee had Munchausen by proxy, which so many people are just blurting that out as fact. People are saying it definitively, but without a real diagnosis, it cannot be definitive. It just can't be. It's not possible. It is irresponsible to definitively diagnose Dee Dee with Munchausen by proxy after her death, posthumously, but it is considered acceptable and often useful to describe her behavior as consistent with that disorder, especially in educational or awareness context. Although I don't think it's responsible to use Dee Dee as an example of Munchausen by proxy in an educational context. That's not responsible either. But why do so many disagree with the informed interpretation that Dee Dee had Munchausen by proxy? There is the overlap with malingering. Dee Dee did get some external rewards, low-cost housing, charity trips, community donations, even cash, because malingering is all about faking illness for external gain. Some people see her actions as fraud rather than a psychological disorder. Fraud that, when Gypsy was old enough, appeared to be in on. Just look at the jumping in the snow video.
Gypsy Rose reporting from Aurora, Missouri. I am about to dive off our porch into the pile of snow. You ready?
She is actively playing the role of a paralyzed girl, knowing she could move her legs. To skeptics, it looks like she was just running a long con, not suffering from a mental illness. There's also the lack of formal diagnosis. Again, Dee Dee was killed before she could ever be evaluated by a mental health professional, by a psychiatrist, or diagnosed in court. That means the Munchausen by proxy label comes entirely from outside observers after her death. Since there is no official medical record diagnosing her, some argue it's speculation at best. There's also the role of media and true crime narratives. The media often frames cases in dramatic, simplified ways. Munchausen by proxy became a sensational headline, almost a shorthand for her entire life, which does not follow the FACT guidelines, F-A-C-T, fast, accurate, concise, and true. It only follows fast, but not the three other pertinent elements in responsible reporting. Critics argue that Munchausen by proxy flattens the complexity of her motives and makes the story sound cleaner than it actually was. And by motives, I mean Dee Dee and Gypsy's motives. To be thorough, let's do a comparison and contrasting of Munchausen by proxy, factitious disorder imposed on another, and malingering. I promise we're almost done with this part. These two terms both involve deception, especially around illness and symptoms. But the motives, methods, and impacts are very different. How do they compare and how do they contrast? And why do they matter in the real world. From hospital rooms to courtrooms to criminal cases, they matter. Malingering isn't technically considered a mental illness. Instead, it's viewed as a behavior, a choice, where someone intentionally fakes or exaggerates symptoms of illness or injury for external gain. That external gain, again, could be a lot of things. It could be money. It could be attention also. Disability benefits, time off of work, insurance payouts, or for lawsuits. Avoidance of responsibility, like, again, dodging military service, school, or work. Avoiding punishment, like pretending to be mentally unfit for trial. The key here is motivation. Malingering is done for very practical, often selfish reasons. Financial, legal, or occupational benefit. Now, let's turn to Munchausen by proxy. This is far more disturbing. Instead of faking their own illness, the caregiver, most often a parent, creates or exaggerates illness in someone under their care, usually a child, to gain attention, sympathy, or a sense of control. It might involve lying to doctors about symptoms, tampering with medical tests, or even causing real physical harm to the victim. The motivation here is not money or avoiding responsibility. Instead, it's about psychological needs. The caregiver craves the attention, the sympathy, or admiration from others that they receive for being seen as the devoted, self-sacrificing caretaker. So let's compare them directly. Both involve deception related to health. Both can waste medical resources and put lives at risk. Both require deliberate effort and planning. Now, the differences. Who is affected? Malingering focuses on the self normally. Munchausen by proxy targets another person, usually a vulnerable child. And what about motivation? Malingering seeks external tangible rewards, like we've spoken of before, money, avoiding work, or escaping punishment. Munchausen by proxy seeks emotional rewards like attention, praise, or sympathy. What are the consequences? Malingering may frustrate doctors and waste time, but Munchausen by proxy can cause long-term psychological damage, medical trauma, or even death of the victim, like in the case of 5-year-old Garnett Spears. His mother, Candace, falsified medical records and subjected Garnett to repeated unnecessary medical intervention. She starved him and misrepresented his health to doctors. Garnett eventually died from malnutrition. Also, 8-year-old Olivia Gant, her mother, Kelly, fabricated illnesses and put Olivia through unnecessary medical procedures, including feeding tubes and medication. And understanding the differences isn't just academic, it's important in medicine, psychology, and even law. Doctors have to distinguish between patients who might be exaggerating versus those who have genuine disorders. Psychologists and social workers must recognize red flags when children are repeatedly hospitalized without clear medical cause. In the legal system, malingering often comes up in criminal cases where defendants claim mental illness to avoid sentencing. Munchausen by proxy, on the other hand, leads to child protective investigations, which, didn't happen a lot in a lot of these cases, custody battles, and sometimes criminal charges for assault or even homicide. So how do professionals detect these conditions? For malingering, red flags include symptoms that don't match medical findings, inconsistent stories, a clear incentive like avoiding jail or gaining money. For Munchausen by proxy, a child with frequent unexplained illnesses that don't respond to treatment, a caregiver who seems unusually eager for tests, procedures, or medical attention. Symptoms that only appear when the caregiver is present. Spotting these patterns can literally save lives. Now let's move to 2015. Gypsy conspires with online boyfriend Nicholas Godejohn to kill Dee Dee. Evidence has shown that Gypsy was the leader and the mastermind. Nicholas was reluctant. He didn't want to do it, but was sucked in to the romanticization. Gypsy pleads guilty to second-degree murder, receives a 10-year sentence, of which she served 8. She was paroled after 8 years. It really is an extraordinary story, so extraordinary that it demands proof. And proof is where the public begins to question Gypsy. Gypsy spent most of her life living a lie, not her own at first, but her mother's. She pretended to be sick, wheelchair bound. She knew she could walk. She pretended to even be developmentally disabled. Neighbors, doctors, charities were all deceived. That history makes some people wonder, if you can fake cancer for years, how can we trust anything you say now? She grew up learning that deception equals survival. So Gypsy downplays involvement in early police interviews. No, it wasn't me, not at all.
You're leaving a lot of stuff out that you need to probably tell me. Do you want to talk to me about it? Tell me about it?
Sure, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'll tell you.
You planned this with him, okay? You didn't get locked in the bathroom, okay? I'm not stupid. First of all, the lock's on this side, so you can't get locked in there.
I know.
Okay, you went in there because you brought that knife into the picture. You brought the idea into the picture.
I didn't bring the idea.
You did bring it into. You brought the whole thing in the idea.
No.
And he did it for you.
No. Okay,
Yeah,
no.
he did. Okay? So, the lies, they're done. I'm not going to sit in here all night long.
No, I
doing this
won't
with you.
give you. I won't give you any life. I did not think of this. I know that he has a evil side, and he did want to do it.
Okay, I understand that. I understand that.
He wanted to get rid of my mom.
Yeah, for you.
Yes, for me.
Yeah, because you asked him to.
He wanted to.
Yeah, because you asked him to. Plain and simple.
We...
Gypsy, we're not playing this game, okay? You asked him to. That's why he did it. Okay? Plain and simple. We're not playing this game. I'm not going to spend all my night long listening to your lies anymore. You told me the truth on some things, but you left a lot of stuff out. You left a lot of stuff out. So we're not playing this game, okay? He's already told me everything. Everything.
We're both trying
The knife was mailed. You guys mailed it here, okay? We know where the knife's at. So the gig's up. You're done. It's up. You're done. You're done. You hated your mom?
I did not hate my mom. I did not hate my mom. I loved my mom. And
You would have never done this to your mom.
He needs to tell you that I honestly have been having horrible, and I didn't want to do it, and he said that he would commit suicide if we didn't.
Yeah.
Did he tell you that?
Yep. Yep.
I said that it was a bad thought that I was thinking, and yeah, I don't think that we should be doing this.
A lot of people think about stuff, but when you act, that's when you cross the line, and that's what you've done. You acted upon it, and he acted upon it. So, okay?
In later documentaries, she admitted that she asked Nicholas to kill Dee Dee. Some viewers see these shifts as calculated image management. Graphic role-play emails show that she encouraged violent fantasies. Where did that even come from? A sheltered girl ever under her mother's watchful eye? Her behavior seemed to contradict her I felt trapped narrative. At times she claims that she always knew she wasn't sick. Elsewhere, she says that she believed some diagnoses until late adolescence. These aren't minor slip-ups, okay? They're not. They're central to understanding motive and state of mind. Critics argue that Gypsy tailors her story dependent on the audience, whether it be law enforcement, journalists, admirers, supporters, family. Many believe Gypsy manipulated Nicholas. I don't understand, and this is just me being personal, I don't understand how anyone can't believe that. She did. Nick was described as socially awkward, isolated, and mentally limited in terms of judgment. Still completely responsible for what he did, and I'm not excusing that in the least. But she sought that type of person out. That is what I believe. But that's not what this video is about. It's not about what I think. It's about the big picture. But anyway, she used that. He had difficulty understanding consequences and was easily influenced. I don't believe that he understood his Miranda rights. I do not believe that he understood his Miranda rights when the interviewing officer read them to him. However, I do believe Nicholas knew the difference between right and wrong, and a low IQ and autism is not a get out of jail free card for murdering someone. It just isn't. Gypsy actively seduced and built an intense emotional connection with him online before meeting in person. I'm sorry, I have to take a sip of my drink. I'm so sorry about that. My mouth was suffering. She used sexual messaging, secrecy, and promises of love to manipulate him. She presented the murder plan in a way that made it seem like the only solution to her trapped situation. And she did it in such a way, pulling his alter ego Victor out from the shadows to make it seem like they would be living a real life dark fantasy. While she was supposedly physically and socially restricted by her mother, Gypsy gained emotional and sexual leverage over Nick. She weaponized his feelings and vulnerabilities, knowing that he would act to please or protect her. There are hundreds of messages where she outlines the murder plan. Hundreds. Her public stance often frames Nicholas as the lone killer, as the bad guy. He manipulated her. She takes no responsibility for her role, and it was her plan beginning to bitter end. Gypsy first portrayed herself as a frightened bystander, but phone records and Nicholas's confession contradict her whole story, showing that she had actively planned the killing. Supporters say that she was ABUSED and desperate. Skeptics say she exploited Nicholas's mental health and devotion, then distanced herself once the deed was done. Not quite. It was she was with him until they were arrested. Let's talk about the media and fame, or infamy rather, that followed Gypsy's prison release. After release, Gypsy launched social media accounts, book deals, documentaries. That was even before her release. Critics feel that she enjoys the spotlight while minimizing responsibility. Some compare her to other true crime figures who became celebrities. She has continued to demonize her mother, Dee Dee, and also Nick, while moving on with her life. After she took her mom's life, and yes, took Nick's as well, and some would even say Nick's mom's. For people already suspicious of Gypsy's truthfulness, every glamorous photo shoot feels like confirmation. And not only that, but another stab in her mom's back. She's still performing. Although that stuff has died down quite a bit, people are still suspicious. She wants to be America's sweetheart, but we don't need someone showing the world, showing kids, do bad things, get book deals, get a TV show on Lifetime, etc. No one needs that as a role model. What are factors that are fueling disbelief? 1, a lifetime of practiced deception. Illness hoaxes taught her how to lie convincingly. 2, shift in narratives. Interviews years apart rarely align perfectly. 3, partial confessions, admitting some guilt while framing herself primarily as a victim. 4, media incentives, attention, rewards, dramatic retellings. 5, parasocial fandom. A strong fan base can polarize public opinion. Put together, these elements create an atmosphere where every smile, every post, every carefully chosen word is scrutinized for hidden motives. And we do that. I know we do. I don't do it as much. I'm not concerned about the itty bitty details. Trauma survivors often have fragmented memories. Okay, I don't think her memories are fragmented because her stories change completely, not just little nips and bits. Victims may minimize or reshape stories to cope. Also, I don't believe that's what's happening here. Changing details doesn't automatically mean deliberate deceit. It doesn't help, though. Now, those would be fine arguments, but the anti-Gypsy crowd does not buy it. They don't believe the claims against Dee Dee, and the details change dramatically all the time. They aren't tiny slip-ups. These aren't little snafus. Not every consistency is a calculated lie. Sometimes it's the mind's way of surviving unspeakable trauma. And sometimes a lie is a lie and another lie and another lie. Gypsy had freedoms that seemed to contradict her victim narrative. She had multiple social media accounts. She met men online. She dressed provocatively, made sexual videos, and cultivated an online persona far removed from the image that her mother tried to impose, or allegedly tried to impose. And it gets darker. Reports from interviews suggest that Gypsy didn't just manipulate Nicholas into murder. She also made statements indicating that she would give him their daughter, I'm trying to clean this up as much as possible, at a certain age, effectively attempting to orchestrate SA on a child. This shows that while Gypsy was allegedly a victim of severe maltreatment, allegedly, she also became a manipulator and perpetrator herself. And this is documented. Although she tries to deny it by saying that Nicholas told her to say that about their daughter when they had one, there is the text thread where she says that she'd give him their daughter to SA, and she claimed that Nicholas told her to say that, yet there's no text that has been found that says that has him telling her to say that. Those critical of Gypsy argue that she was not a helpless pawn, but the mastermind. She didn't call the police. She didn't tell a neighbor. She plotted her mother's killing. And what followed only fuels this perspective. One of my biggest questions has always been, why didn't she tell Aaliyah? She told her about the sexually fueled internet chats with Nicholas, and that secret seems safe with Aaliyah. I think Aaliyah could have, and I believe would have, helped Gypsy. But in the interrogation, she did call Aaliyah her bully, but we know that wasn't accurate. I don't even know why. I don't know what her motivation for saying that was.
Aaliyah's worried about you?
Aaliyah? Are you kidding me?
Look at me. Look at me.
Aaliyah's always been a bully to me.
Okay, but look at me.
After the murder, she and Nicholas checked into a motel. They had sex. They ordered food. They mailed the murder weapon back to Wisconsin. To critics, that doesn't look like a victim finally breaking free. It looks like a killer enjoying her victory.
Hi, honey. I'm feeling it. He's eating a brownie. But later he will be eating me.
And then there's Nicholas. He's now serving life in prison without parole, while Gypsy served only 8 years and walked free. Those who view Gypsy as manipulative believe she preyed on Nicholas's vulnerabilities, using sex and attention to persuade him to commit murder on her behalf. He took the fall while she received a much, much lighter sentence. For them, this isn't justice. It's a miscarriage of it. Others point to Gypsy's own inconsistencies. At one point, she claimed she didn't even realize that she had been ABUSCD until her lawyer told her. Yet in interviews, she's described a life of constant control and fear. And if the ABUSC is the reason she killed her mom, how did she not know that was happening until her lawyer told her? To skeptics, this contradiction suggests that Gypsy has learned how to reshape her story dependent on the audience, always angling for sympathy. Her prison emails add fuel to that belief. Messages where she comes across as sexual, controlling, dramatic, and persuasive, echoing the same behavior critics say she used in 2015 to lure Nicholas into committing murder. Which leads me to wonder, does she seek out men with mental issues or dependency on substances? Does she purposely seek those types of men or those types of people out because she knows that she has a gift of being able to manipulate them? But there's an even harsher take. The claim that Gypsy was never ABUSCD at all, or at least not to the extent that the public has been led to believe or have been told to believe. These critics point to medical records that show Gypsy had only a small number of prescriptions. They note that no doctor conclusively diagnosed Dee Dee with Munchausen by proxy. Gypsy might have had unnecessary procedures like a feeding tube, and well, she did have a feeding tube and surgery on her glands, but was that a mother's ABUSC or the medical system's failings? Or were they truly medically necessary? There's no clear evidence that Dee Dee was poisoning her daughter, which is common with Munchausen, or deliberately making her sick, like the mothers of Garnett Spears and Olivia Gant. Those moms were deliberately making those children sick. In this version of the story, the Munchausen narrative wasn't a proven medical reality. It was a defense strategy, a way to shift the story from a brutal murder into a tragic tale of escape. Documentaries and Hollywood productions leaned into that angle, leaned right into it because it was sensational, and that's what was going to keep people watching. It was compelling, and the public ate it up. But for those skeptics, Dee Dee wasn't the villain that she's been painted as. She may have been overprotective, maybe controlling, but not the monster the media made her out to be. And Gypsy, she wasn't a victim of a psychological disorder. She was simply a murderer who benefited from one of the most successful spins in true crime history. And yet, there's still the other side, the one that sees Gypsy as a girl who truly had no way out, or felt she had no way out. From birth, her mother dictated her life, shaving her head to mimic chemotherapy, forging medical papers, feeding her through a tube, isolating her from the outside world, and manipulating doctors and neighbors alike. But how isolated was she when she was putting on personal sex shows for certain men online? For people who believe this version, Gypsy was trapped in a prison, long before the one that she eventually served 8 years in. She didn't just wake up one day and decide to kill. She acted out of desperation after years of psychological and physical torment and medical ABUSE. And in their eyes, 8 years in prison was punishment enough. But we can't ignore that she planned her mother's murder for nearly 2 years before it was carried out, which would have been plenty of time to just plan a clever escape if things were that bad at home. 2 years, plenty of time to plan an escape, not a murder. During the long planning period, she researched knives, mapped out a plan, and persuaded Nicholas Godejohn to carry out the act. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was careful, deliberate, and sustained planning. Actions that are undeniably calculating. Yet, Gypsy has maintained that she didn't fully realize that she was being ABUSED until her lawyer explained Munchausen by proxy to her while preparing for her plea deal. That claim creates a striking contradiction. How could someone who allegedly didn't understand that she was a victim orchestrate a violent, premeditated, vicious murder over years? How could she manipulate another person into committing murder if she were completely unaware of what she endured herself? This is why opinions about Gypsy are so divided. On one hand, she suffered genuine maltreatment, still alleged. She was isolated, manipulated, and denied basic autonomy by her mother for most of her life, allegedly. On the other hand, her actions leading up to Dee Dee's death demonstrate planning, strategy, and awareness, traits that go beyond what we typically associate with someone who is solely a victim. In short, Gypsy Rose Blanchard is possibly a victim and a calculated actor. Her case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior. The type of mistreatment that she claims does not necessarily erase agency. And victimhood does not automatically absolve someone from moral responsibility. The duality of her story is what makes it so compelling, so controversial, and so difficult to categorize neatly, and so polarizing. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe Gypsy was both a victim and a perpetrator. We know she was a perpetrator. We know that. There's no maybe about that. Maybe Dee Dee was both controlling and caring. Maybe the story we've been told is a blend of fact and fiction, no doubt about that, shaped by lawyers, media, and public fascination. I know most critics say there was never any kind of ABUSE at all. Some people point out that Dee Dee was well liked. Everyone liked her. But the thing about abusers, they are often well liked by the outside world. There is no true way to know. I don't necessarily believe the Munchausen angle, but I do believe it is very possible Gypsy was still mistreated by her mother, at least until Dee Dee's health started failing. And that's from my own personal experience with a mother who everybody loved. but often talked about ways she would kill us if she can get away with it. I do believe that they switch roles near the end, but many of us, if not most, lived in households with parents that committed CA in some form. We did not resort to murder. And one argument is, well, Gypsy had it worse. I say that is not an acceptable argument. There's no way to measure that because we can't say who had it worse in this world. We just can't make that comparison. Now let's address this issue, which I think is interesting because Becca Scoops actually just released a video about this. I am not piggybacking off of her. I was preparing this before, which she does a great job, don't get me wrong, but since I already had these notes, I want to go ahead and throw this part in. Gypsy has told many versions of her story. One detail she shared in her memoir is that her mother was about to put her through a dangerous exploratory throat surgery for vocal cord dysfunction. A surgery she believed could kill her. Granted, that's what Dee Dee could have told her. But when we dig into the medical records and reporting, that surgery doesn't add up. So what really happened in the days before the murder? Again, not knowing what exactly Dee Dee told Gypsy, except for what Gypsy tells us. So let's break it down. In her memoir and in interviews, Gypsy has described how Dee Dee supposedly wanted her to undergo surgery on her larynx or vocal cords. She said it was pitched as life-saving, a procedure to treat vocal cord dysfunction, and that she felt in real danger of dying from the procedure. The problem is, there is no such thing as exploratory surgery for vocal cord dysfunction. That condition, also called paradoxical vocal fold motion, is diagnosed by laryngoscopy, a scope used to watch the vocal cords while a patient is breathing. Treatment is speech therapy, breathing restraint, or medication, and it's not a deadly illness. Surgery is not part of the medical protocol for that issue. So what procedure did Gypsy actually have right before the murder? According to the record, it wasn't throat surgery at all. It was a routine feeding tube replacement. In June of 2015, the day before Dee Dee was killed, Gypsy and her mother were at the emergency room having her gastrostomy tube swapped out. That's a non-surgical routine procedure. It's maintenance. So why the discrepancy? Why do we have Gypsy talking about a dangerous exploratory surgery when the paperwork shows a simple tube replacement? There are two possible explanations. One, Dee Dee fabricated the idea of throat surgery to frighten Gypsy and keep her compliant, to keep her in line. That would fit the pattern of Munchausen by proxy that they're trying to sell us, exaggerating illnesses, creating medical dependency, and forcing unnecessary procedures. Or two, Gypsy herself exaggerated this detail later in her book to dramatize the control that she was under and make her actions seem more understandable. Unlike a tube swap, a life-threatening throat surgery sounds urgent and terrifying. I lean towards the latter, that it was Gypsy. To put this in perspective, Dee Dee allegedly subjected Gypsy to unnecessary medical interventions, surgeries, medications, and feeding tubes included. Doctors who later reviewed her history said most of these procedures were unnecessary and unjustified. People magazine has reported that Dee Dee often lied about Gypsy's medical history, leading to multiple unnecessary treatments and procedures. But nowhere in the records released publicly is there proof of a scheduled or performed exploratory larynx surgery, because that doesn't exist. The verifiable procedure on the books the day before the murder is the feeding tube replacement. When it comes to the specific claim about exploratory throat surgery, the medical evidence doesn't match up. The actual emergency room visit and procedure were, again, for the feeding tube replacement. Everything beyond that, the life or death throat operation, either came from Dee Dee or from Gypsy, and I believe it came from Gypsy, reframing the story later to make her situation sound even more dire and to make herself seem more sympathetic. I'm sympathetic to the feeding tube, so. Dee Dee allegedly manipulated the medical system and forced unnecessary procedures on her daughter. But when Gypsy tells the story today, sometimes details blur between fact and narrative, and that's why it's important to go back to the medical evidence and the reporting to separate what's documented from what's dramatized. We don't all believe it is blurred at all, but
all right. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to read each one of these out loud to you. If you understand it, then just initial after it, okay?
Okay.
All right. Before we ask you any questions, you have the right to, you must understand your rights. If you understand that, then put your initials right there. We'll go through each one of them together.
Okay, because, well, I have a question.
Yeah.
If I may ask. Is it okay if I put it right there after you read them all to me?
We have to do them one at a time.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
So
That's just so I can make sure you understand each of them.
okay.
Just your initials. Yeah, just like that. Okay, the next one is you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court.
That's a little different than on TV.
Yeah, I told you. You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before he asks you any questions and to have a lawyer with you during questioning. Right there.
Alright.
If you can't afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you before any questioning if you wish. That one goes right there. Okay, if you decide to answer questions now without an attorney present, you can stop answering questions at any time, okay?
Okay.
All right, sign right there, initial that if you understand that. And can you read, Nicholas?
Yeah.
Another question I knew the answer to, but I went ahead and asked it. But if you can read this paragraph right here to me out loud, and if you understand it and agree with it, then you can sign this thing.
Okay. I have. Okay. Please forgive me for
No,
wait
you're
for so
fine.
long.
You're fine.
Okay. Alright. I have read this statement of my rights, and I understand what my rights are. I am willing to make a statement and answer questions. I do not want a lawyer at this time. I understand and know what I am doing. No promises or threats have been made to me, and no pressure or
Coercion.
coercion. I've never been able to say this word at
I
all.
know. Do you know what it means, though?
Doesn't it mean like a form of punishment?
Yeah, or trickery or anything
Oh,
like
okay,
that.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, coercion of.
Nicholas Godejohn is one of the most controversial figures in the story of Dee Dee Blanchard's murder. And we are going to make an in-depth video about him and discuss that, but I just want to get through this. His role in the crime has sparked endless debate. Was he a tragic victim of manipulation or a dangerous murderer who knew exactly what he was doing? I'm sorry I got all up in your face right there. On one side, many people feel sympathy for Nicholas. He was young, socially isolated, but he was an adult, socially isolated and living with autism. Friends and family described him as awkward and vulnerable, someone who struggled to navigate relationships and social expectations. Supporters argue that Gypsy took advantage of these vulnerabilities. She groomed him over time using sex, attention, and emotional manipulation to convince him to commit a violent act. From this perspective, Nicholas was not fully in control. He was a young man caught in the web of someone else's calculated plan. Some people even believe that he should have received a lighter sentence. They point to his mental health history, his lack of social support, and the fact that he was deeply infatuated with Gypsy. They argue that he was acting out of loyalty, love, and fear rather than pure malice. In their eyes, Nicholas is a tragic figure, someone who made catastrophic mistakes under extreme influence. But the other side is equally compelling. Nicholas was not a child. He was a grown man at the time of the murder, legally an adult, capable of understanding right from wrong. He made conscious, deliberate choices, traveling to Missouri and stabbing Dee Dee Blanchard 17 times. I know not everybody believes he did it 17 times. He said 4 real times, but we'll talk about that in the video about Nicholas. But that level of planning, premeditation, and violence cannot be overlooked. But that wasn't his premeditation, it was Gypsy's. Critics argue that regardless of manipulation, he is a murderer, and his actions show he is capable of extreme harm. During his trial, Nicholas's mental health and autism were considered by the court, but they did not absolve him of responsibility. Psychiatric evaluations indicated that he could distinguish between right and wrong. His defense argued diminished capacity, but prosecutors emphasized the planning, the deliberate nature of the crime, and his awareness of the consequences. The jury ultimately found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But I think that, this is why the stuff with Gypsy needs to be discussed more. I think a murderer is a murderer, and they belong in prison, but I think maybe life with the possibility of parole would have been a more fair sentence for him, or even 30 years. Public opinion remains divided. Some feel deep sympathy for Nicholas, citing his difficult upbringing, social struggles, and manipulation by Gypsy. They see a man trapped in a situation he didn't fully understand. Someone who became a pawn in a larger story of abuse. On the other hand, many see him as a dangerous individual whose actions were deliberate and lethal. They argue that empathy for his circumstances cannot erase the fact that a woman lost her life in a violent and calculated attack by him. Nicholas's case also raises larger questions about accountability and justice. How much should mental illness or social vulnerability influence sentencing? And at what point does manipulation become an excuse for violent behavior? Because there are a lot of men in prison who are manipulated by a woman. And how do we balance understanding the complexities of human psychology with the need to protect society from harm? Personally, many people look at Nicholas and conclude that despite his struggles, he remains a danger. He committed a violent, premeditated act, premeditated by Gypsy, and the consequences of releasing him would be too high. His case reminds us that life is rarely black and white. Even those who are victims in one context can be perpetrators in another. And the law, society, and public opinion all grapple with these nuances differently. In the end, Nicholas Godejohn is both a tragic figure and a convicted murderer. His story forces us to confront more uncomfortable truths. I just drooled, I'm sorry. That ABUSE, manipulation, and vulnerability do not automatically erase agency, and that human behavior is complicated. His life, his choices, and his actions leave us with questions that may never have clear answers. And that tension is what keeps this case in the public consciousness long after the headlines have faded. Gypsy Rose once admitted that long before the night of her mother's murder, that she had already tried to kill Dee Dee. She said that there was a time when she got a hold of a gun that she believed to be real. One day, while her mother was standing in the kitchen, Gypsy aimed the gun and fired it at Dee Dee. The bullet hit Dee Dee, but it wasn't what Gypsy expected. And I had also read that it was she fired it multiple times, so maybe it was just once. The gun turned out to be a BB gun. It didn't kill her, but it did leave a mark and caused enough pain that Dee Dee needed medical attention. Instead of reporting what really happened, Dee Dee came up with a cover story. She told Gypsy that they would tell the doctors at the emergency room that they had been attacked in the Walmart parking lot. In the Walmart. That's believable, trust me. I've been in many Walmart parking lots. She then took Gypsy along with her to the emergency room, and they both pretended to be victims of a Walmart attack. Gypsy said that moment was when she realized two things: how far she was willing to go to get out, and how deeply her mother controlled every situation. Or maybe her mother just wanted to say that to protect Gypsy from getting in trouble for trying to kill her mom. You know? But that was just what Gypsy said. And I believe that we have established that her credibility is shot. She has even told the story in different ways. In some versions, she shot Dee Dee when she was asleep, and it didn't cause any pain at all, and Dee Dee didn't even wake up. So this story has been told a couple different ways. That incident in the kitchen shows that the murder years later wasn't sudden or spontaneous. Gypsy had already imagined, planned, and even attempted to end her mother's life before Nicholas Godejohn ever came into the picture. He wasn't even a thought yet. Whether people see that as the desperate act of an ABUSCD daughter or the sign of premeditation and manipulation, it's a haunting reminder that the seeds of violence were planted long before that fatal night, long before Nicholas Godejohn. What we do know for certain is this: a woman is dead, her daughter is free, and the debate over what really happened and what it really means is far from over. Whether you see Gypsy as a manipulative killer, a tragic victim, or something in between, one fact remains: her story is layered with deception. Public doubt may never fade, because in a life built on lies, the truth will always feel slippery. So in the next Gypsy Rose discussion, I will be talking about Nicholas Godejohn. We'll follow it up with Dee Dee, and then we will all wrap it up with why all this still matters today. So I hope you join me with those upcoming videos. I appreciate you stopping by, and if you made it to the end, God bless you, and thank you. I know it was a long one. I know this is probably my longest video ever. I tried to shorten the video. I cut parts out, but I really wanted to drive home certain points, and I could have broken this down into a couple videos, but I just thought it just flowed well all together. There is still so much to say on this topic to fully cover every bit of it, and I'll never get through it all. But I think this, with the collection of information out there, is enough for everyone to make their own informed opinion. And I ask that you not only watch YouTubers, but that you deep dive into the documents that are available online. You could even look up scholarly articles on the topic. But thank you so much for watching. Again, email me if you have any particular issues you want me to discuss in this regard. And anyway, thank you so much, and I'll talk to everyone later. Bye.